I'm Sarah Jackson, host of Internal Comms Pro, the podcast, a listening experience choreographed to help you elevate your internal communications to the pro level.
So the first step is to have a conversation about what does value mean to your leadership team. So you need to get on the same page and align what you're talking about.
Where are your points? Where are the things that stop you moving forward? Definitely understand what are your triggers, what are the areas that are stopping you moving forward.
It's through celebration that you begin to think, actually, I can do something else. I can do something bigger. And we're always talking about the fact that we want to change the world. So I guess we're helping each other to do that.
Hello, folks. It's now the glorious month of March, a month to not only celebrate the history of women, but also our future and the future of this industry. Today, I am honored to share my conversation I had with three pioneering women in IC, Jenni Field, Trudy Lewis, and Advita Patel. They are the creators of the widely popular podcast, Calm-Edged Rebels, named after each of their businesses. Jenni Field is the founder of Redefining Communications, known for her field model that diagnoses the root cause of chaos, thus providing calm. Trudy Lewis is the founder of Collinear, a communication and leadership coaching business that follows her EDGE model that helps leaders to become more engaging, dynamic, genuine, and more effective in how they communicate on a day-to-day basis. And the rebel part is Advita Patel, founder of Comms Rebel, that helps you take the leap to revolutionize how you communicate in your organization. She's also the co-founder of A Leader Like Me, a support network to lift up women of color who need inspiration from leaders like them. So, you know that small, quiet voice that tells you to walk down to the CFO office or speak up in that board meeting or start that side hustle, write that book, or join that group? Well, today we're going to talk about the key ingredients you need to listen to that voice and to act on it. If your heart is stirring to make some bold moves this season, grab your best bud in internal comms because this episode is for you. All right, well, welcome to Internal Comms Pro, the podcast. I am so excited, but sweating, but nervous to have the three of you on our show today. I cannot wait to get into this conversation. We have International Women's Day and Women's History Month and so many wonderful things. I'm just so happy that the three of you are here to kick off this glorious month. So I want to talk about the turbulent year of 2020 because it blurred so many of our personal and professional lives. Trudy, you had wrote an article that was titled, Can You Be Trusted? Folks can find it on your LinkedIn. And one of the things, and I'm going to quote from it, that you said was, what I believe is most important is a move that will shape where internal communication goes next. Yes, there's recognition. Yes, the work was delivered at a great pace, but now the needs have changed. Organizations need guidance, advice, and the kind of support that will help them deliver the harder messages around change and reorganization. And I loved that because what we're hearing is now the needs have changed. Has this changed for the good or for the bad for internal communicators this past 2020 year? Trudy, start us off.
Yeah, it's really hard. I had another conversation with somebody else about this the other day where they were saying, what do we do? And it's about kind of taking up the opportunities that are there. So when we were working really hard and being recognized for the fact that we were delivering very quickly, we also had access to leadership. And I think the only thing we can do is actually use that as leverage to get even deeper in, to demonstrate that we understand what they're going through, understand what the challenges are, be assertive. I think, one of the hardest things about it is for us to become quite assertive and quite bold about how we approach things. So we can't anymore sit in that position of, I'm going to be an order taker. I'm going to keep accepting what everybody else is saying. We have to move on to being, I'm going to actually step out and say something to somebody. I'm going to talk to them about the challenges that I see and maybe how I can help them, because it's almost like sometimes you'll see leadership kind of struggling in the mire, trying to get their way out, and you have the answer, and you think to yourself, well, I'm not kind of qualified to go and speak into that group, but actually you probably are. You're probably the best placed person because you understand how to communicate, how to be kind of, how to negotiate with them, how to be a bit diplomatic as well about how you approach it. And I think that's really, really an important way to look at it, that it's not impossible. You might be bogged down, but there must be a way through to keep that conversation going.
For me, it's about measurement. And and this is one of the reasons why Comms Rebel is all about revolutionizing the way you communicate by having effective measures in place so people know the value they bring into the business. Because at the moment, we're all guilty of it, and we've all been there, where you kind of have a to-do list as long as your arm, and it's mostly quantity over quality of work that we're doing. And sometimes you need to step back from that and think, what value am I bringing to this comms that I'm putting out there, these campaigns that I'm doing, and what is the measures that we're actually trying to look at? Because once you have those answers as an internal communicator, you can converse and have a proper conversation with your senior leadership team about what value you're bringing and why they need to think about the outcomes they want and the behaviors they want to see changing. Because we all fall into that trap of just churning stuff out, content. And we're in the 2021 now. We're in this world where we're surrounded by content. Not a moment goes by where if you wanted to, you could spend 24/7 of taking on news and content from all the social medias and news outlets. You don't have to look for it anymore. So we have to be quite conscious as internal communicators with our organizations about what value is the content bringing to the business, and what do we need our people to be aware of, and what is the outcomes that we're expecting them to do, and ultimately, is it actually making a difference? What difference is it actually making to the core objectives of the business? And I think we often don't do that. And that's why a lot of people don't know where to start, because they don't know what they're measuring or what the outcomes are or what the behaviors they want to see changing.
Jenni, where do we start? You have a great field model that I want to talk about. Is that a good place to start? I mean, there's so many layers, and I'm drowning. And I want to give our listeners, I want them leaving feeling energized and hopeful, like, all right, I am going to be more assertive. Trudy said I can, and I'm going to get my measurement on, but where do I take that first step?
So the first step is to have a conversation about what does value mean to your leadership team. So you need to get on the same page and align what you're talking about. So we have a lot of jargon in our profession. We talk about employee voice. We talk about stuff that doesn't necessarily resonate with the leadership team. So I always talk about the conversation that I had with a leader where I had to go in and ask the question, like, you talk about value a lot, and I don't know what you mean when you talk about communication. So can you help me understand where you're coming from? Because I get it from a commercial perspective. That's the bottom line. I get that that's financial. But for comms, I'm just not sure what you mean. And they turned around and said, it's about risk. So for me, the value that you bring is keeping us safe. I mean, I was looking at both internal and external comms. So it was very much about reputational risk. So what that allowed me to do was reframe everything I was doing to be about risk. So rather than talking about the fact that I need to go and, we need to go and do an engagement program over here because all of these people are really struggling or they're not really embracing the digital technology. So we need to go and do a massive engagement campaign to help them. That was actually, changed in terms of a narrative to be around, well, they're going to spend £500,000 on something. So there's a risk to the business of them doing that. So I'm going to go and stop that from happening. So you've got to speak the language of the board. And I think if you're feeling that, that massive sense of there's just so much to get done, there's so much I need to do, there's just too much, where do I start? Things like urgent, important matrices are really helpful. The rule of 5 things, stuff like that, to help you kind of manage that. But also pick your battles. Like, I remember someone saying to me, is this a hill you want to die on? And that has stayed with me forever. Like, there are things that you're going to be asked to do that you're not going to want to do, that you think this is not the right thing to do. but you can't fight everything. So you've got to find the things that are worth fighting for, because if you fight everything, you just become known as someone that's blocking and not helpful. And that's the worst place to be for an internal comms person. So pick the things that you that feel really passionately about and that you can genuinely influence as well.
Well, and not to keep going on this battlefield, but I'm going to keep on going with this metaphor because Advita, I think there's about 19 minutes left in the episode, season 2, episode 4. I think it's your most recent episode. You bring out the Chinese philosopher quote: "Strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory, and tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat." And I'm thinking, wow. So what I want to talk about is, before you get into strategy, tactics, where the world that we feel comfortable and live, there's this whole other world, which is what Jenni's talking about, the board and leadership and the CFO. So there's a step before all this, but we assume that our listeners can just go to the board or walk down to the CFO. If they're not there, talk to me from a female leadership. How do I start to navigate to even get into the door to ask, what are the business objectives? What does value? There's some steps in there, I'm assuming. Can you guide us here a little bit on that?
Yeah, of course. One of the things that I recognize is that there is a lack of confidence in some of our communicators to do that. And it's really important to look at where that confidence is not coming from, to be honest. Where is that lack of confidence? And people often don't want to go to the CFO, like you quite clearly said there, Sarah, because they are worried about looking silly. And we speak about this on one of our podcasts, about looking silly and not being curious. And as internal communicators, one of our greatest strengths of succession is the fact that we do stay curious. And Trudy says this all the time, be curious and ask the questions. And one of the things I did when I was facing into this kind of dilemma of, oh my goodness, I don't know what on earth these people are talking about when it comes to finance, for example, I went and undertook a course in finance for non-finance managers, because I knew where my opportunities were, and I also knew what my development areas were, I needed to do for myself to help, so like Jenni said earlier, speak the language of the board. And in the organizations I worked in, finance was quite a big deal. They may say people first and all that, but you get a sense of what's important to some of these key leaders. So, to empower myself and to build my own confidence in these areas, I went and did the course. I understood some of the terminologies that they use, things like net cash, profit and loss, EBITDA, tax, what does tax mean before this, all those kind of buzzwords that they use in those meetings, where I often looked at them blankly and just nodded along and then didn't question anything, because what questions could I possibly ask, because I didn't even know what EBITDA meant at that time, or what the difference was between budget sheets. So this is what I advise the listeners who are tuning in today, to say, where are your points? Where are the things that stop you moving forward? Go and do a program. If budget, if you've got the budget, go and seek out a program to help you. Go and find a mentor to support you. There are so many. The best thing about the website and the technology that we have available and everything is that so many people have written articles and blogs about various different things. There'll be somebody somewhere that's written something that will give you top tips and advice. And things like this podcast, right? You've had some amazing people on your podcast previously who you can learn and educate yourself from as well. So the first step is to definitely understand, what are your triggers, what are the areas that are stopping you moving forward, to have those conversations with the CFO, with the commercial director, with your CEO. And I always say, we look at micro level things in comms at times. We're always looking at campaigns and all that, which is important, don't get me wrong, but to empower ourselves, you need to look at macro level. So look at the annual report, look at the industry outside, what is going on in that industry. Armor yourself with this information and data and insight, which is why I'm so passionate about measurement, because they can't argue with data and insight, right? It backs up your gut feeling. If you've got the data and insight, you've got some case studies, you've got this kind of toolkit of information. So when you go and speak to the CFO and you ask those questions because you're curious, they will not, they'll never judge you for asking it, because you've done your research and you've taken an educated approach. to having that conversation with them. So those are my kind of, advice and top tips.
Jenny, Trudy, anything to add on this point?
Do you know what? As Advita was talking, I was thinking back to my first job in a local council, and I was just out of university, and there were still fax machines. And I remember, and it was really making me think about, that time in my career, because it's easy when you've got to this stage in your career for us to talk about, go and do this course and network and do this. And so I've been going back to that young Jenny and thinking, actually, I just didn't have the exposure to the CEO. My first job, I didn't talk to the CEO at all. But what I did do was have the opportunity, because of the work in the press office, that does give you the opportunity to go and have conversations with heads of functions and things like that. But I also took the time to be curious and to learn and to put myself in some of those positions. But I didn't have the access to the board at all. But I also don't think you need it. You can actually have some really good conversations with people that are around the board or who influence the board. So don't get hung up on it being the CFO. You could go and ask those questions to anybody and get the answers that you need. And even when I think to my next job out of there, when I was doing media relations, again, I wasn't talking to the board at all then, because the work I was doing was, just not at that level. I was doing a lot of the press releases. I was doing a lot of the trade shows that were abroad, but I wasn't having conversations with the board. They were senior stakeholders, but it wasn't there. And also, you don't know what you don't know. I still remember getting a call from Melkram, who at the time were quite a big body of knowledge, certainly in the UK, about membership. And I was like, I don't know who you are. Like, I've got no idea, because you don't know what you don't know. And I think that when you're in the world of kind of networking and professional bodies, it's such a safe place to be, because you're surrounded by people that have done it before and you can ask. But if you don't even know that world exists, you're just kind of trucking along and you just don't know that that's possible. Now, I said about the fax machine because there's so much more stuff that's accessible now with these podcasts like this. There's just so much out there for you to have access to information and news, which is very different. But I do think there is a bit of you don't know what you don't know. And I think having a manager that invests in you and cares about you, which is what Advita had at the start of her career, is so fundamental to that ability to do stuff. Because if your manager's there saying, well, I know Frank in finance, I'll take you down there and we'll go together. Like, this is cool. But if that isn't happening, that's kind of what you need. You need those internal coaches and mentors to help you. And so ask for that. Don't go to the direct, right, I need to go to the CFO. I've never spoken to Frank in my life, but I'm going to go in there and I'm going to ask him. That's not probably going to work. So find the people around you to help you do that. And that's, an easier way to do it. You wouldn't walk up to someone in a party that you didn't know and be like, right, I'm just going to go and talk to you. You look interesting. You'd kind of talk to your friends and find the people to talk to and be introduced. So, think about the things you use in everyday life to build relationships and bring that into work.
You don't go over to a stranger at a party and say, hello, Jenny. Oh my goodness, what?
Especially you, Jenny, sorry.
I don't. Oh, we've got to test this. I love meeting new people at parties that I speak to my friends quite regularly. I want to meet new folks at parties and stuff. So that's,
but I wouldn't.
We're gonna have to have a chat about.
I wouldn't make a beeline to someone that I didn't know and be like, "Hi, I'm Jenni Field. Let's talk." Like, I just wouldn't do that. Whereas I think maybe if I was with you and you'd be like, "He looks interesting. Let's go talk to him."
The only thing I'll add is, so many of us within comms, we are usually at a lower level in terms of our ranking, our role, to the people that we're having to engage with every day. So if it's, you might have to, your stakeholder might be the head of an area, the CFO or so on. And you've got to find ways to relate to them. And I remember once I was doing some comms for the this division, and my main stakeholder was actually the lead person. And he was going on about this project. And I kept thinking, I have no idea how to help him, and then made an effort to say, look, I need to speak to your strategy director and sit with him and understand what it is you're going to deliver, because what they were doing was creating a brand new strategy. And again, it does take a bit of assertiveness and it takes a bit of curiosity. So I sat with him and just said, what is it you're working on? Explain to me what this particular piece of work is, what it's going to do for the organization, how is it going to unfold, and how do I then need to communicate that with the staff? And through that conversation, it just opened a door where he started to ask me questions about what I thought about some of the things he was inputting. And as a result, it really helped him to come up with a strategy that was a bit more relatable to everybody. And so since then, it was, after that happened, it was just like a constant, I need to speak to Trudy about this particular situation. And I think it's just one in that you need. You just need one situation where you've got in the door, you're able to have the conversation, you're curious, and that just opens up kind of, not a really can of worms, but it opens up quite a lot of opportunity for you to keep having more conversations like that.
Well, speaking of opening doors and being first kind of and pioneers in this space, and also going back to something Advita said, knowing what's going on in the industry. So for 3 pioneering women, what is going on in the internal comms industry now? And Jenni, I saw that you had written an article about referring, I think you referred to an MIT article, but you were talking about people and technology and focusing on this. So talk to me a little bit about what is coming. What about people and tech? What are you seeing? I want to talk, and give our listeners kind of a heads up, like this is the new world. This is what's coming. But I also hear caution in some of your work and your voices about the balance of knowing the people, but also balancing that with the innovation and the technology.
Yeah, it's a really hard balance, isn't it? And I've just written something today on the use of the word hybrid and whether or not that's a complete red herring for leadership teams, when actually it's about flexibility of work and the human side. But I think, when we're looking at what's coming, technology is here to stay, right? Technology isn't going anywhere. And for years, technology in organizations just hasn't been to the standard that it needs to be. And now you can't hide from that. Organizations are now so dependent on technology that we have to have investment in that in order for that to work. For me, the thing that's coming is the kind of integration between people and technology. And I'm not talking about kind of robots and fusing that together, but it's kind of how you look at the rhythm of an organization, how you look at how it works, how you look at how people move, what they do, and how that works seamlessly and easily together. Because at the moment, we're still kind of fighting against the trend that's coming. And I can, even just really basic examples. I was talking to a client last week about the use of the chat function in Zoom, that we now have become so comfortable with Zoom meetings and chat function that people are having side chats all the time that you wouldn't have been having in a real face-to-face environment. You might have been WhatsApping the odd mate, but you wouldn't have been having a whole other separate conversation with the 200 people that are in that virtual space. And then, the example the client and I were talking about was where somebody had asked a question and it was being answered. And as the CEO was answering it, people were kind of bashing him a bit in the chat, saying, well, this doesn't feel right, or that's not it. And so we were talking about, what's the solution here? And I get a bit like, turn chat off, because I'm a bit old school. So I get a bit like, turn it off. You wouldn't have it on in a face-to-face meeting. We have to kind of get used to coming back to face-to-face, and that isn't there. So I would turn it off. And I went out and crowdsourced some answers, because I thought, I'm not sure I'm right here. And I know I have a tendency to go quite hard and fast of just to shut it down. So I went out and asked other people, and the general consensus was you need someone to moderate the chat. So actually, if you have someone there whose sole purpose of that event is moderating the chat, then they're able to manage that in a way that things don't escalate and get out of control. Now, we haven't looked at exactly this, how you're bringing tech and people together in a way that creates a really nice, seamless experience. We're still kind of finding our way. So that for me is just a nice, quite simple example of how we need to look at how we bring stuff together. Because even though people are going to be going back to the offices, the world of work is going to change because life has changed. And finally, work has caught up with society, and the fact that we don't have this ability to go to work 9 to 5 and then come home, because that's not what society is now because of technology. So that, I think, has got to be such a big focus. I always talk about the human side. So, leadership skills, line manager skills around resilience, empathy, communication skills, all that stuff. But if I was an internal comms manager and I was working in an organization, I'd be looking at line manager skills, and I'd be making sure that we have a digital strategy that is long term, but clearly looks at how we are linked to the rhythm of the organization with that technology.
That is good. Advita, what about you? What's your take on this? I know we've other things we hear from listeners. How do I pull people and not push people to comms? And now I've got all these channels, and now I got to feed everybody, and it's so much more work. Talk to us about, how do you manage just the mobile app, and now we've got the intranet, and now I've got my newsletter, and it feels that they're overwhelmed. Talk to me a little bit. How do we navigate through all that?
Do you know, one of the things I see quite a lot of is that people introduce new channels, but they don't exit old ones, or things that are not having the impact. And we seem to have this weird, and I'm saying we in terms of the industry, to kind of be a bit magpie, right, with some of our approach. So we see a new digital channel, and I know digital is definitely the trend, and it's the future of internal comms. We have to get on board with it, as Jenni said, otherwise we're going to be left behind. But we also need to be a bit smart about how we're using these channels. Like, there's no point having Yammer or Workplace if you're just going to replicate the information on your intranet and copy and paste it into those spots and put it the same thing on your app and then the same thing on your poster. It's just a pointless activity. So you need to kind of understand the purpose behind all of these channels. What value are they bringing into that business? And which ones can you retire? Like, you don't need to have 1,000 channels, because if you do your insight and your data, you'll know which ones are having the most impact. And you need to understand that. And as soon as you understand which channels are working for what, and what comms you're going to put on each channel, that's when you'll get the best impact of it. And, retire if you've done a magazine for 20 years, and you might hear some, and I always talk about the invisible army, they won't like it. They will really be up in arms about it. And I'm like, who are they? Like, who are these they everyone talks about? And I think as comms, we often don't ask those questions. Like, I'm a bit like, a little bit like Jenni in terms of, like, I want names. I want names. I want the department, and I want to know who they are, and I want to go and have a chat with them. Give me those names, because I am not one for the invisible army. I hate the invisible army. I hate they don't like this. They are not comfortable with this. They will not agree with this. I'm like, I get it if it's like, 1,000 people in an organization with like 3,000 folks, but if it's 10 or if it's 20 of those loud voices, it's not like I'm going to ignore their views, but I want to have a conversation with them. I want to understand what's going on, why they're so, held on to things like magazines if it doesn't add any value. There are some organizations that will find the magazine actually is very, very, loved, and people use it, read it, gain information from it, and will really nourish the information from that. You need to know your organization inside out. And the challenge, I suppose, we have at the moment is because things like podcasting, events, and webinars are quite easily accessible. We do fall into the trap of listening to other people's case studies and go, oh, I'm going to do that when I go back in, and I'm going to bring this in. And I'm like, it's great listening to all the great things that are going out there, but what is it going to help your business? And even if you're in the same industry, you can't do a carbon copy. You need to, culturally, it's going to be very different. So get to know your people, ask the questions, and retire the channels that are not having any impact whatsoever and that you're wasting a lot of time on if it's not giving you the outcomes, which is why measurement is important, that you need in the business.
The Internal Comms Pro Collective is proudly supported by Circle Broadcast. Now, you know how Jenni was talking about using technology to sync with the rhythm of your organization to create a seamless experience? And how Advita was talking about the pointless activity of replicating the information on your intranet and then copying and pasting it and putting the same thing on your app and your other channels? Well, Circle Broadcast can stop that pointless activity, as it allows you to create, edit, and distribute all of your internal content from one centralized platform. With Circle Broadcast, you can simplify and innovate your IC tech stack with their cross-channel comms approach. Yep, With one click, publish and send your content to your employee email, SharePoint, Teams, and mobile app. And now your employees can consume it on the channel of their choice. Head on over to circle.com/ICP to learn more about their unique internal comms solution. That's CERKL.com/ICP. Now, in this next part, Trudy, Advita, and Jenni share the advice they'd give to their younger selves, and we dive into how their friendship, along with Cheetos and gin, were the key ingredients for each of them to take risk and make bold moves. Trudy, anything of what you're seeing that we should be preparing for, new trends? Where are we headed?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things for me, and I'll reiterate what Advita and Jenni said there about culture. So I'm somewhere at the moment where, there is a possibility to put in all sorts of different channels. They have Yammer, that they have all these other things, and they're not using them. And the interesting thing is, at this time, it would be great if they could use some of these things, but culturally, that's not how they operate, and that's not who they are. The challenge is really that, if you've not done that investigation as to why, who uses what, how do they normally work? Do they even have time to use these channels and look at them? Is the content viable? I mean, and leadership, unfortunately, go all over the place and see a lot of exciting tools, and people see them on the golf course and say, look at this shiny tool, and they see all of this stuff and they think it's amazing. So they come back and they say, I need to speak to the comms team right now. The other side is how we also kind of just play that yes person rather than taking a step back. And within our leadership, we have to kind of say, do you know what? I know it sounds great. I know it's shiny and new, but could we do some exploration? And I think within technology, we have to understand that and understand the strategy that's needed behind that in terms of, well, what are we going to put on it? We need to learn tech, but we cannot throw out the strategic function that internal comms has. We can't.
I want to go back to something Jenni said. She's like, if I could go back to my younger Jenni. So I want to run with that a bit. One of the things we try to do on the show is move people to kind of this pro level, just one step closer to really, upping our pro game. And if you could go back to that younger woman, what advice, warning, hey, this is where I really screwed up, this is the biggest thing I learned, do not do this, or hey, this is what I'm seeing. Go back to the younger Jenni, the younger Trudy, the younger Advita. What would be the one piece of advice you would give your younger self? Jenni, let's start with you.
I think it would be to not get too bogged down in some of the kind of. So I remember going and doing a course with a new intranet and going and learning how to code for it, and it's stuff like that you can kind of get pulled into in comms, which is just a waste of your time. And there's a nice phrase I heard this year, which is about whether or not it uses my genius. And so I don't do things that don't use my genius, which I really like. So, we've got decorating work going on at the moment, and the guys are sort of saying, oh, yeah, I could never do what you do. And I'm saying, but I could never do what you do. That's your genius. This is my genius, stick in the lane. And I think there's something in that, in what we do in comms, because it's so broad what we do that you can easily be pulled in a direction that other people want to pull you in. So if you think, I don't think I should be doing that, that's not for me, then kind of, pull out of that. And don't be afraid to say, I think we absolutely need to do that. I just don't think that's the right use of my time or the best use of my time, or I don't think I'm the right person to do that, but I'm going to find the person. So always have a solution to a problem, never just go with a problem. So I think that's what I would probably do, would be, think about the ways you were pulled in directions and pull yourself out of those. That would probably be it.
Two things that I would say to myself. Advita, don't dye your hair blonde because it'll turn ginger. That's advice number one. So that is something I would definitely say to myself if I could go back and do that. So the advice I would give to myself is don't be scared of asking questions. And, I felt asking questions would put me in this space of not knowing, and I felt like I had to know everything. And there's different scenarios on why I felt like I had to know everything, but I did fear asking questions at times, into leaders and to people. And 23, 24, you're trying to make your mark in the world. And one of my first jobs was facing into leadership. So I remember walking into the chief executive's office when I was 25, and bearing in mind, my parents were entrepreneurs and never worked in an office, so I never grew up with office talk at home, the office etiquette. So my parents never came on and said, oh, the CFO did this and CEO, I didn't even know the terminologies, to be honest. So at the age of, taking away that horrible job at the beginning, the proper jobs, walking into that, CEO's office and being told to do certain things, I was mute. I was like, and I know because you're nervous and you're confident, but I wish I kind of had a little bit of bravery at that time to go, there's nothing wrong with asking questions if you don't know the answer. Don't leave that room going, oh my goodness, what on earth did they just say to me? What do I do? And then really be nervous about creating the piece of work. So if you're any age, it doesn't matter what age you are, right? Don't ever fear asking the question, because nobody is going to begrudge you for it. If you're genuinely asking because you don't know and you want to know more and you want to learn, nobody would ever begrudge you for that. So that's my advice. And I wish I could go back to my 25-year-old self and say, nothing's going to happen to you if you ask a question. It's absolutely fine. So yeah, so don't dye my hair and ask questions. Oh, it was traumatic. We'll have to do a whole other podcast on my traumatic years.
Wow.
Mate, I've had a fringe. I've had orange stripes. I mean, we've all done it.
Oh gosh. Trudy, what about you?
Mine's not as exciting as Advita's. I think I wish that I had been a bit clearer, a bit earlier about some things in terms of what I really wanted to do. Now, when I transitioned to get into PR and comms, I did some soul searching. I kind of did some research. I looked at all the things about my own personality and attributes and thought, well, what's the best career? And that was quite late. And I wish I'd done that a bit earlier. And then the other one was also getting involved in professional bodies. So understanding the breadth of the career, the breadth of the industry, understanding kind of what's happening for people across the industry. I was I was a member of CIPR, our Chartered Institute of Public Relations, for a very long time, but I didn't get involved until quite late. And if I'd done that earlier, it would kind of enhanced my experience. So I'd say to anybody, anything that's going to let you understand your industry more, understand your environment more is key.
Well, and a good old professional conference unearths a nice formula of Cheetos and Jen, which seems like the start of what was Jenni's outline to her book. We got to go here because I know we've got a few more minutes left. I want to end with this story because I think it does show when women come together and when you have a kindred relationship and friendship that they can push you to go do that, right? They can be the extra second set of eyes. So let's talk about that. Talk about your friendship, how it started.
I think Cheetos and Gin sealed our friendship, to be honest, and we all knew each other, pretty well. We'd been on the same committee at the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, and we weren't, we were friends, but we weren't like close friends. I would say, we connected, and I remember when Jenni said, "Oh, I'm speaking at the World Conference." She got accepted to speak, and she went, "Do you want to come with me?" And I was like, oh my God, that's sounds amazing. Let's go. And then she said, "Oh, Trudy's going to come as well." And then we created a WhatsApp group. And we had never spent more than like 3 hours together. Never, right? I think committee meetings, and we might have gone for a drink or a dinner, something like that, but never spent more than 3 hours together. So we booked our flights, jumped onto a plane, got to Vancouver quite late at night, and we're like, oh, what should we have to eat? What should we have to eat? Like went into the store and we got a bottle of gin, and we were like, Cheetos, and all three of us were like, oh my goodness, dinner sorted. And I think that I don't know if Jenni and Trudy agree, but we have spoken about Cheetos and gin night quite often, and we literally sat in our apartment drinking gin and eating Cheetos on our first night in Vancouver, and we knew at that point this is a friendship, that this friendship is not going anywhere. This is sealed because we've sealed it with a bit of, a few packets of Cheetos and a bottle of gin. And I think that was the things that led to where we are today, I would say.
What's so fascinating about that is that not everybody likes Cheetos and not everybody likes gin. And so it was fascinating to me to walk into a shop and then we all made a beeline for Cheetos and we all said we loved it. And so Advita is 100% right about saying that it sealed our friendship. It was kind of like the things that started a number of things that point to the fact that we've got a lot in common. And so it was quite intense, and we spent non-stop talking from the first day from the plane ride. Actually, it was crazy.
Yeah, and I think also we took the decision when we booked the tickets to go to the conference. We worked out it would be more cost effective to get an apartment, which was also quite bold for three people that don't really know each other. So we were like, this is either going to be great or hideous. But we all kind of went into it knowing that that's what it would be. But actually having our own little space, I just remember I was like, this is like the best holiday I've ever had, because I'm geeking out about comm stuff with two people that are also geeking out about comm stuff. And then we also had, like a holiday at the same time and explored Vancouver, and it was just brilliant. It was like one of the highlights of my life is that week in Vancouver, for sure.
That 7 days really did, I think, like Jenny said, we did geek out on our comms passion. We sat down and Jenny had just been approved for her book at that time, and it was just such a really sitting there and just talking about like how it could be, it was just such an amazing time, and it was one of the best trips I've had with friends anyway. And no offense to any other friends who are listening, but it was the best trip I've had with friends.
Oh no. Well, I want though our listeners to hear this so that they can see the power of going to these conferences and friendships and things that can manifest by having the boldness, if you're not involved, to get involved in these things, because this industry is just so open and warm and welcoming, and everyone shares. So let's keep going down that Vancouver trip. You talked about, Jenny, that was sort of the birth of your book. Tell me about this book. What is it about? Tell me all about it. I'm excited.
So it was in Vancouver that I was actually writing the kind of pitch to the publishers. So it was Advita and Trudy that helped me get that right, to help it kind of make sense. So they were instrumental for me in having the confidence to do it, and also making sure that I wasn't just talking nonsense, which is always a risk. And so the book's called Influential Internal Communication, and it's out in April. And really, for the reason I wanted to do it was because I read a lot of books, and I was getting to the point of, if people just read like a little bit of this book, and a little bit of this book, and a little bit of this, then they would get it. They would get, why we need to do. You don't need to read whole books on stuff. Actually, just having some of that top level, so you've got the breadth of knowledge, is kind of all you need to kind of help you go forward. And I wanted to talk about the Field model, which is the model that I created, which is just kind of codifying what happens when you start to look at what's going on in an organization. So that's got 3 stages. It's understand, diagnose, and fix. And so the book talks about how you can take the Field model and apply it to an M&A, or apply it to growth, or apply it to issues with teams. And it takes you through how to do that. So you don't need to spend loads of money. You've kind of got the format there to kind of do that. But it also covers basics around neuroscience and all sorts of different things, just to help you think about some of that breadth that you need for internal comms. And yeah, I'm really scared about it. It's probably the most vulnerable thing I've done in terms of putting everything that's in my head into a book, and putting that out there for people to critique is scary. Definitely the scariest thing from a career perspective, but also really exciting. And these two have been with me every step. Every time I've got stuck on I just don't know what to write for this chapter. They've both been amazing, hopping on a Zoom call, looking at stuff, helping me make sure it makes sense. I just, every step of the way since that Vancouver trip to publishing, it's like it's almost been, the 3 of us together every step, which has been amazing.
I love that you talk about that story. Go ahead, Advita.
It's a bloody brilliant book. And this isn't a friend talking. I'm genuinely saying that it's a fantastic, fantastic book. It is so, if you're going to read any book about internal comms, it's definitely that book. And it's going to be out in the next 6 weeks or so. And you definitely get it on your list to must read. And I'm honestly not saying that because I'm biased, but I've read this book and there's no way we'd allow Jenni to put something out there that we would be embarrassed to be friends with her about. So just bear that in mind, because we've each got a little bit of an ego, so we make sure that it's a good book, right? If we're going to be friends with her, we want to be proud friends. So it's a good book, so definitely get it on your list to read.
Well, we will help promote it when you get it out. We'll be watching for it. Well, let's go to Advita and Trudy. How has this friendship pushed you? You have such a multifaceted world. I mean, Advita with A Leader in Me, and we got a conference coming up. Tell me about all that and how this friendship helped push you even to do more, beyond just your consultancy.
Yeah, I mean, A Leader Like Me was something that was driven by various different experiences that I had in different organizations. And my co-founder, Priya Bates, and I decided, after I asked Priya to be my mentor, to create this program and subscription, because we felt there was a gap in the market for people of underrepresented groups wanted to progress in their careers. And thanks to the friendship of Trudy and Jenni, they encouraged me to go for it. I launched Comms Rebel and A Leader Like Me during a pandemic year, 2020. I started it thinking all the planning I did previously to that, Jenni and Trudy were with me with every step about how it might work and all that. And then pandemic hits and I'm like, oh, sugar, what am I doing? And these, both Jenni and Trudy kept me grounded and then encouraged me to kind of reach out and get a mentor who maybe didn't know me as well as these two did, to give me a bit of unbiased views and all that kind of stuff. And that's how I got connected with Priya. And from that conversation with Priya, we ended up creating A Leader Like Me. We did the program called Flight, and then we got a subscription service called The Nest. And then we decided and through the conversations we'd had with Jenni, actually, and this is the most powerful thing about our friendship, we're very, very open with each other. When the whole diversity, equity and inclusion thing blew up last year with the murder of George Floyd, Jenni quite openly and asked questions about things, like what I want to learn, tell me more, guys, what is it that I am missing out on here, and how can I be better at these kind of areas of work? So that kind of got us thinking, Priya and I, in terms of we need to create something that helps allies and sponsors understand a bit more about why this area of work is so important. So we created a conference called two conferences. One's Diversity in PR, which is October, and then the one that's coming up on 23rd of March is Diversity in Action. And this is about all that listening that everybody has done and all that information that people have heard and thought about. The next step is putting it in action, is understanding what can I do in my remit and my influence to help make change happen. It's wider than race. We've got people talking about disability, we've got people talking about LGBTQ+, we've got people talking about different areas of those underrepresented groups, and it was driven by the conversations we had as a friendship, the kind of uncomfortable conversations at times we all had, right? And and it's hard for Jenni to kind of ask these questions, and we knew that Jenni's got this safe space to ask these, but we also acknowledge that there are people out there that don't. So we were quite keen, through A Leader Like Me, to create a safe space, a community where you can ask the uncomfortable questions, understand a little bit more about why we're doing what we're doing, and learn and grow and develop and hopefully help influence change. And this was driven by our friendship, and that's why I hold it so close to my heart, because it can make a difference if you do lean into the community.
Trudy, tell me about how these two have pushed you to do things that maybe you wouldn't have done.
Well, yeah, I think friendship's amazing, and community's amazing as well. And we have to understand that we can't be alone. We can't work alone. We've got to have kind of people who are helping us. And throughout the whole year, especially 2020, I had to rebrand, and as part of that rebrand, these two, as usual, greatly helped me. And when I say greatly helped me, they weren't all yes, this looks great. It was no, that looks that's not right. and being honest. And I think having two people to be really honest with you about something that you might think is perfect is is great, because it just helps. So throughout last year, I launched, in addition to everything else, I launched an event series called Talk 50. And again, it was really strong encouragement from Advita and Jenni about getting that done. The first one was live. It was supposed to be a live format, but the first one was the very last day that we were allowed out of the house. So the others have all been online, and I'm going to repeat that series this year. Then I also came up with my model, the Edge, which I mentioned earlier, which really allows me to apply a coaching model to some consulting. And I'm really passionate about getting leaders equipped. They're really, they really need help, and I'm hoping that the things that I developed does that. But I can't say that I would have done half of that without the support of Jenni and Advita. They've been absolutely amazing friends, a really great support to me. So yeah, there's more to come, I'm sure. So proud of both of them because of all the things that they've done. They keep singing each other's praises, which is which I think is necessary, because we celebrate what we're doing together. And it's through celebration that you begin to think, actually, I can do something else. I can do something bigger. And we're always talking about the fact that we want to change the world. So I guess we're helping each other to do that.
Well, I can't thank you enough. I raise my hand. I want to be an ally. Whatever that means. If that means I have to eat a bag of Cheetos, it's my favorite snack too. So thank you for sharing your story and your story of friendship. I think it just models for those of us who, particularly at a time where we might be feeling isolated and that we're by ourselves, to get your own band of dreamers, two other women, and get, it doesn't have to be Cheetos. It can be whatever your thing is, and go start changing the world. So what else can we promote? What else can we do from the Internal Comms Pro side?
So Comms Retreat came out of us retreating together. And we did our first one 2019. So we went to the World Conference, and as a result, we wanted to do a follow-up to that. So we decided to get together later in the year. And that was, I think, the October. And we had this session where we did some development together, some coaching together. We had a lot of fun. We cooked a lot of food. It was an amazing time, actually, of building each other up and addressing some of the things. We got to talk about things like our brand and our USP and how we talk about ourselves. And we thought we wanted to bring that to market. And I'm going to let Jenni continue that one.
Well, so is it just the three of you, or is it now available to anyone?
Yeah, so it was just the three of us, and that's what made us go, actually, we did 3 nights, I think, and we were like, in these kind of 2 full days, we have smashed through some things that were kind of blocking us. We had some free time, like out in the countryside. We were in the countryside in the UK, which was just beautiful. But we had some really focused time on us, and that's what made us think, actually, if we could do this with maybe like 12 people, no more than that it would be too many, and get like a space, like exactly like we did, where we cook together and we talk and everything else, but you're together for those kind of few days to help you unlock stuff that's holding you back, whether you're a consultant, whether you're a leader, whatever you might be doing, but having some really focused time to help you kind of unlock that and change that, working together as a group, and then also one-to-one with us as kind of coaches and consultants to help explore some of that. So that's what we've been toying with, and we were going to launch it last year, but this pandemic kind of ruined that. So we're still talking about doing it this year and having really small numbers, but just looking at how we can bring that to market for people to help them get the same benefit that we got from having kind of an intense few days together, focused on that. So yeah, that's the plan. So people can get in touch with us if they're interested, because that's kind of what we're doing at the moment.
I was just going to say, we have got you can go to the CalMed Rebels website as well. So if you want to know a little bit more about it, then there's some more information is on there, because we have shared our thoughts and ideas of what this day, two days could look like. So, but as Jenny said, please do feel free to send us a message on DMs, each one of us, or through the CalMed Rebels kind of social networks as well.
Well, and like I said, we'll link it in the show notes. I think you speak to this retreat. It provides that moment when you do go to these conferences and you have these side conversations and you can really dive in and start applying what you've learned. It's that magic moment that feels like that's what someone might get out of, retreating. So I love it. We will promote it. Again, consider us as an ally, from a female entrepreneur to female entrepreneur. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me. And I can't wait to stay connected and have our listeners connect with you as well to navigate this great big world of internal communications. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it, folks. 3 pioneers that are now added to your network. And you can hang out with these pioneers every other week during their bi-weekly podcast. We'll put the link in our show notes. If you're a younger woman or man starting in your career, make sure you check out their episode on how each of them got started. Also, if you want to expand your network, consider attending the Diversity in Action Conference. Hey, you already know Advita's going to be there, and since she's behind it, you know it's going to be good. IC Pro podcast listeners can receive 10% off if you use the code ICPRO10. Now, next week, our podcast begins to share the latest strategies to give you fresh ideas on how to engage employees in this new world of remote work. We're going to start with leadership and how to create transparency with your frontline workers. You don't want to miss it. Stay with us as our journey to up-level your internal communications to pro level continues.
Internal Comms Pro, the podcast, is produced by the Internal Comms Pro Collective and proudly supported by the Circle Broadcast Suite, an entire suite built for internal communicators. Learn more at circle.com. And don't forget to visit www.internalcommspro.com/show notes for our free resource guides. Thank you for listening.